I don't even think the Title IX investigation is justified.
The parents are mystified, demanding to know what exactly in this video justifies their sons being formally investigated for sexual harassment.
Another day, another horrifying trans rights story going viral and setting the LGBT community back decades. We're going to break this down, plus so much more, on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our media, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. Up first, we've got to talk about a crazy saga that's playing out in the name of trans rights, but it is really nothing of the sort, as we'll explain, in Loudoun County, Virginia, a greater DC area suburb that is apparently controlled by some pretty far-left progressives, and the policies of their schools have in the past made national news because of the unreasonable cover-ups and just ridiculous, nonsensical policies that they have in place when it comes to gender and other issues involving students. And another saga is playing out that shows this absurdity and is leading to widespread outrage across the political spectrum. We're going to get into it and walk through some excellent reporting that ABC 7 did on this story. Here's the general intro to what's going on.
Last week, 7 News' Nick Minogue broke the story that Loudoun County Public Schools is investigating 3 young men who were videotaped inside the boys' locker room at Stonebridge High School. That video was shot by a female student who uses the boys' facilities because she identifies as male. The boys' parents want to know why their sons are being investigated, while the student who shot the video in the locker room, which violates school policy, is not facing the same scrutiny.
I mean, the details of the story get exponentially worse, but just to recap, you have a situation that played out where a female student who identifies as trans, identifies as a boy, went into the boys' locker room, recorded multiple boys, actually tons of them, in the locker room without their permission or their consent, clearly violating their privacy and violating school rules. And then when a couple of those boys said something to the effect of, "Oh, there's a girl in here," or "What, there's a female in here, I'm really uncomfortable," they were investigated for sexual harassment. Title IX investigations, which are ongoing, while the trans student wasn't investigated at all, even though the trans student clearly broke the rules about recording people in the locker rooms, which totally set aside all the trans politics, isn't appropriate or okay or allowed. But guys, the details of the story just get worse and worse and worse.
7 News obtained the video at the heart of Loudoun County Public Schools' Title IX investigation into 3 boys accused of sexual harassment of a female student. That student identifies as a boy and has been using the boys' locker room facilities. She took this video in school.
I'll find out.
The female student turns on her camera and walks into the boys' locker room at Stonebridge High School. Most of the video is dark, but you can hear locker room sounds and boys' voices. This is the moment some of the boys in the locker room realize the female student is there. 30 seconds later, you hear this.
I'm so uncomfortable with a girl. Female, bro. Get out of here.
That's when the female student appears to take the phone out of her pocket and aims the camera at the boys in the locker room. Shortly after that, the video ends.
So guys, I watched the full video and it does not show any sexual harassment, to be quite clear. The sexual harassment is not in the room with us. It shows a trans student apparently going looking for an issue or a problem because the student started recording before even entering the locker room. So it's not like, oh, the student felt harassed or unsafe and then started recording to make sure that they had it all on video. So in case something bad happened, no, that's not what happened. They just started recording before they even went in. And I watched the full video. These guys just express their discomfort, and that's being considered potential sexual harassment. But the actual video basically exonerates them, unless there's some more that hasn't been released, because there is no sexual harassment recorded anywhere. If anything, recording people in various states of undress without their permission in a locker room seems a lot more sexual harassment-y to me. And this may be why the school district tried to not give parents this video. ABC7 reports that the school system refused to give a copy of the video to the 3 boys who are being investigated, according to the boys' families, and the only way they were actually able to receive a copy of the video was by submitting a Freedom of Information Act request to the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office, which had a copy of the video. The sheriff's office had a copy of the video because deputies were reviewing the video to see if the female student committed a crime by recording minors in a locker room. So there's something just kind of Kafka-esque about that. Like, you're being accused of committing a very serious offense by your school and being investigated, and they have it on video but won't show you the video. I'm glad they were able to get access to it, but this never should have had to happen this way, and I can't imagine being one of those parents and being trapped in this nightmare where your students are being accused of a very serious offense when they're actually the victims. But this is the broken, upside down world that identity politics and this far left social agenda can take you to, I guess. We're going to get into even more of the details, and it gets worse, actually. It actually gets worse after this. I know my audience doesn't want to end up like this.
Just a reminder that I am very fat and very sexy, and I am 100% glorifying obesity, and there's nothing you can do.
That's why I'm excited to tell you about Lumen, the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's an amazing device that measures your metabolism through your breath, and on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs, and even gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. This is so important because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does. Optimal metabolic health translates to a ton of benefits, including easier weight management, better fitness results, better sleep, and improved energy levels. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/Brad, that's lumen.me/Brad, to get 15% off your Lumen. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring today's episode. So let's take a look at the next clip from this ABC7 report.
I spoke to the parents whose sons are under investigation.
I don't even think the Title IX investigation is justified.
The parents are mystified and angry, demanding to know what exactly in this video justifies their sons being formally investigated for sexual harassment.
Loudoun County Public Schools absolutely failed these children, every single one of them, including the complainant. And they need to take ownership of it.
I have a daughter that's in high school as well, and if there was a male in there videotaping her in the locker room, I would have issues. If it's my son and there's a female in the locker room videotaping him, I have issues.
Loudoun County Public Schools policy prohibits any kind of recording in locker rooms, but in an email to parents, school officials said the video the girl recorded does not show his son in a compromising situation or, quote, violate his privacy in any way.
Wow. So honestly, kudos to these parents for how poised they seem, because I'd be crashing out. I'd be losing it. I'd be so mad, especially I'd be very mad as a gay man who hopes to adopt kids one day, that my kids were had this done to them in the name of the LGBT community or something like that, because that's outrageous. But the idea that they actually contacted the school with this complaint, like my sons were recorded in the locker room, that's very clearly not allowed. And they said, well, it's fine because it doesn't show them in a compromising position, so that it's not really a violation of their privacy. I mean, I doubt that would fly if a heterosexual male student went and recorded female students in the female locker room, and, for example, they were still mostly clothed. The school wouldn't be like, well, it's fine because they weren't in a compromising position. No, it breaks the rules, so hold them accountable for it. Like, it's not that deep. At least it shouldn't be, unless they're just afraid to punish a student who identifies as trans because they'll be accused of transphobia or something, or they're so blinded by their own ideology. Remember, the people that run this school district are mostly hardcore Democrats. Here's the next clip.
I believe that is an invasion of their privacy.
This father tells 7 News LCPS refused to show him the video and the beginning of his son's Title IX meeting. He said the LCPS investigator peppered his son with questions the dad believes were intended to bully him into admitting to something he didn't do.
They didn't show us the video until after they had tried to get my son to say who said what and all this kind of stuff. But then once we saw the video, then we started asking about those context questions and how that could be left out. And they didn't really have a good answer for that.
I'm still not over the fact that they wouldn't show them the video. Like, you're being investigated and accused of a very serious offense, and you're not even presented with the evidence, in air quotes, against you. That's insane. And a violation of their due process rights, actually. So Loudoun County has been sued before, and I can tell you right now, they're probably going to get sued again over this whole disaster of a situation. Of course, many of the school board officials and the superintendent were asked about this by the reporter over at ABC7 and were conspicuously quiet. Only one responded, and I haven't checked, but she's a Republican.
I asked Superintendent Aaron Spence and all 9 school board members about this case. Only board member Dina Griffiths responded, saying, quote, "Recognizing biological differences isn't discriminatory. It's common sense, and it's essential for protecting the dignity and safety of all children."
How depressing is it that I have never heard of this woman, but I can be like 97% sure that she's a Republican based on that single sentence? This is bleak, y'all. Simply bleak. Thankfully, Loudoun County is being investigated over this, and there are many other shenanigans on these kinds of issues.
The Virginia Attorney General's office is investigating LCPS over this Title IX case, and the U.S. Department of Education is investigating LCPS and 4 other Northern Virginia school districts over policies that allow students to use locker rooms based on gender identity and not biological sex. Nick Minock, 7 News.
So, look, unless some huge revelation or some facts we don't know about comes out, this story is insane. It's an obvious injustice, and unfortunately, it's just one of many stories like this, where this gender ideology gets embedded into local policies and school districts, and you end up with these kinds of dysfunctional and broken results. Look, I understand that it would be a weird experience and an uncomfortable experience to be a trans teenager or a teenager with severe gender dysphoria who wants to present as a guy, but like, would it be really so bad? First off, I mean, just don't record. If you don't record, then you are in a totally different situation if you don't record other people without their consent in a locker room. But would it really be so bad to have them change in a third space? I mean, when I was in high school in Massachusetts, I mean, it was a more rural area, but it was still, I think, fairly liberal in some ways. We actually had a trans boy student, so a biological female, who early on in high school was a girl named Jen and came back after one summer as Jay. And Jay used the bathrooms and the locker rooms, and I never cared at all. I didn't feel uncomfortable with it, partly because Jay completely minded his own business, just went in a corner and changed, and never recorded anybody, never made a big deal about it, never made other people uncomfortable. But unfortunately, and so I do have compassion for people like that who have existed, aren't suddenly a new thing. But the problem is that this issue has gotten out of control, and it's gone way beyond that and way beyond those kinds of circumstances where I really do think people can be reasonably accommodated. So I think the only way out of some of these gender wars that are tearing these school districts apart is some kind of neutral third space policy. But if you even suggest that kind of thing, deranged trans activist types will call you a bigot and scream at you and try to turn your life upside down in some deep blue areas. I mean, I watched part of the school board meeting that they had, I think just yesterday, about this controversy and other things. And some of the people who called in or attended the meeting to defend a trans student, even though to me what they did was indefensible in terms of violating policies and recording people in locker rooms, just are unhinged. There's no other way to put it. I mean, take a listen to this one woman who called in.
We'll start with our virtual speakers, starting with Meredith Ray.
Thing that is biological. Red hair, a real genetic trait. So I assume we'll be hearing testimony tonight from someone saying, my kids feel uncomfortable sharing a bathroom or locker room with a redhead. Or maybe, I'm not a gingerphobe. I just think redheads are being forced on our kids. Maybe we'll see legislation requiring redheads to register with the school nurse or be banned from playing girls volleyball because it's not fair. They have an advantage. Sounds ridiculous, right? The focus on trans kids isn't about comfort or safety. They are about generating fear and the need to bully someone more vulnerable. And who better than a child just trying to exist? Let's be clear, trans kids are not the problem. Trans kids are just kids like redheads, black kids, brown-eyed kids, and tall kids. The real problem is adults who think they're brave for going after children.
Wow. So there's just so much to unpack there, from the very dubious claim that being trans is a biological trait. It's a lot more complicated than that, and I don't think that is a supported statement by evidence and research, but it's definitely not the same thing, even if there is some biological aspect to who experiences gender dysphoria or some genetic aspect. It's not the same thing as being a redhead. And you suggesting that the complicated realities of biological sex, which honestly affect us at the cellular level in thousands and thousands of ways, the difference in chromosomes and hormones and all these kinds of things, is the same as having different colored hair, is ridiculous. It's laughable. Of course, there's no advantage from having a different color hair in girls volleyball. What are you talking about? But are you going to actually pretend there's no advantage at all between males and females in sports, especially high school sports? That's absurd. And this is just the kind of thing that makes you sound ridiculous, especially in this situation, to portray this student as if this is some helpless victim. I mean, this student is still a minor, still basically a child, so I don't think anyone should go after or target them or harass them or anything, but they should face discipline consequences for violating school rules. And if anything, I don't know, if somebody's going to be held accountable for sexual harassment, it should probably be the student who recorded other people changing without their permission or knowledge. But the fact that you have these lived out callers and moms in the district or whatever coming in here and acting like this poor trans student is the victim of this all blows my mind. And the fact that this school system is punishing the victims, because even if they're ultimately found not responsible or whatever, subjecting someone to an extensive Title IX investigation is a punishment in and of itself. And you're basically branding them an accused sexual harasser over an incident where they were actually the victims. It's insane. And again, I don't know how many times I have to say this, but if y'all think these people, right, these bleeding heart liberals who run these school boards and enact these policies, if you think this is how you support the LGBT community and increase acceptance, you are delulu beyond belief. Because what this kind of thing does is turn reasonable, responsible, even apolitical parents who have no issue with gay people, have no issue with trans adults potentially, into suddenly not supporting this. Because hold on, you're telling me that this movement or this activism is associated with kids getting to record my son changing and then not be punished for it, and my son gets investigated? Well, you can't tie a movement to such unreasonable positions and outcomes and then expect it to not lead to backlash. And that backlash doesn't mean all these people are evil bigots. It means they're having a pretty understandable reaction to the absurdity they're being presented with in the name of LGBTQ plus whatever Wi-Fi password community. And that's what really bothers me about these stories. First and foremost, my concern is for the kids whose lives are being turned upside down and who are being treated incredibly unfairly by all the reporting we have so far. But more broadly, I do take issue with this kind of thing because it is the reason you see support for things like gay marriage going down again for the first time in years, when it's just been going up and up, including with Republicans, because for whatever reason, and it baffles me, we have allowed our rights and our acceptance to be lumped in with this kind of sheer and utter insanity. And to the extent that we allow that to continue, decline in public support for the rights of everyday gay, lesbian, bisexual, and even trans people will be our own fault, because you can't present people with incredibly unreasonable propositions and then act like a victim when they don't sign up for them. Just my take. You guys, I'll be sure to read the comments. I very much look forward to hearing what you guys think of this one. And be sure to hit that like button if you haven't yet. And do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. By the way, guys, make sure you're subscribed to my second channel, where I just dropped a bonus video discussing whether it makes me a hypocrite that I do sometimes use trans people's preferred pronouns, but sometimes I don't. If you want to see that and a bunch of other bonus content, that's what my new second channel is for. Check it out, linked in the description. Plus, check out the new merch items. We just dropped On My Last Brain Cell merch line that I think is really cool. Plus, we have the Your Delulu is showing items and much more. and send me a voice note for my Friday episodes where I react to your woke horror stories and take your personal scenarios and give you my thoughts and my advice. So do check out the link in the description and send me a voice note I can potentially respond to on air pretty soon. And now we're going to talk about one final thing before we wrap up today's episode, and that's the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. That's literally what they named it. The massive tax and spending bill Republicans are trying to push through a pretty closely divided Congress right now. And look, it's complicated how the sausage is made in Washington. I've reported and covered on this stuff for years. I have some idea of how it all works, but it's not easy for anyone to just get everything they want and everything they do. But I do have to take issue with one particular thing from the Trump administration, which is just kind of the gaslighting of it all. This is not a good bill. It is a deeply flawed bill. And look, when you have a razor-thin majority in the House and in the Senate, fairly thin, and you need to pass this stuff, I understand you can't get everything you want. But just don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. That's really all I'm asking for. And unfortunately, with White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt, that is apparently too much to ask. Take a listen to this, because Karoline Leavitt is gaslighting us again.
Is the president okay with this bill adding to the deficit?
This bill does not add to the deficit. In fact, according to the Council of Economic Advisors, this bill will save $1.6 trillion. And the president absolutely understands and hears the concerns of fiscal conservatives and of Americans who want to get our fiscal house in order. That's what the intention of this bill is. There's $1.6 trillion worth of savings in this bill. That's the largest savings for any legislation that has ever passed Capitol Hill in our nation's history. The next bill that even comes close was $800 billion. That's less than half of the savings that we see in the One Big Beautiful Bill. And so the goal of this bill is to produce economic growth, to cut taxes, and to get our fiscal house in order. And this is the right step in the right direction towards doing that.
So this is why I could never be the press secretary, because I don't even blame Karoline, but your job as press secretary is to lie. It is to stand in that room, look into a camera, and tell the American people things that you know are not true. And that's what she is doing here. What she's talking about as savings are spending cuts, but this bill pairs it with massive tax cuts, which some of which are good, some of which I have questions about. But when you do that, the net effect is adding trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars to the national debt and the budget deficit over the coming decade. That's just a fact. That's what every nonpartisan analysis has found, from the Congressional Budget Office to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget and beyond. It just is what it is. When you look at all the provisions of this bill, the spending cuts and then the much bigger tax decreases, the net effect is adding trillions of dollars to the deficit. And of course, Trump promised to balance the budget and get all the house in order and all that, and this bill doesn't do that. And I understand why, right? It would be basically impossible to get a bill passed that actually does balance the budget. Congress is just not willing to make the kinds of spending cuts you would need to make to actually do that. So it's not really Trump's fault, but again, just be honest about it. And they're not doing that. Here's the truth about just how big an impact this budget bill would have on the national debt from Manhattan Institute fiscal hawk and budget analyst, one of the best in the business, Jessica Riedel.
This tax bill's enormity is being underplayed. If you take out the expiration dates, which even Republicans say are not real, this tax bill will cost more than the 2017 tax cuts, the Pandemic CARES Act, Biden stimulus, and the Inflation Reduction Act combined. It would add $6 trillion over 10 years to the deficit. Ultimately, my projections show deficits heading to about $4 trillion a decade from now if this bill is passed combined with the baseline, and even higher if interest rates rise, and we've seen that interest rates are rising.
To be clear, there's plenty of good stuff in this bill that I really do support, like extending the tax cuts for most Americans from Trump's first term. I think that's great. There's also some weird stuff in there that I really don't support, like a big increase in this special tax subsidy given to people, particularly very affluent people in blue states, where they get to write off a portion of their local taxes on their federal tax bill, even though that doesn't really make any sense. It also doesn't repeal all of the wasteful Green New Deal boondoggle subsidies from Biden's big Inflation Reduction Act that had nothing to do with inflation. And then the big, beautiful bill introduces a bunch more weird tax loopholes and exemptions that complicate the tax code. And I really want it all simplified and just reduce the rates for everyone, not a bunch more new unique carve-outs and loopholes and hundreds of pages more of IRS guidance, all that kind of stuff that creates a complicated boondoggle that benefits whoever can hire the best accountants. But again, it is what it is, and I do acknowledge the political realities that constrain the Trump administration from just enacting the kind of bill that I would like to see and that they claim they would want to see. But just be more honest about it is really all I'm asking for from Karoline Leavitt and from the Trump administration. Don't just make claims that are obviously not true and then tell us to pass it and it's big and it's beautiful. That just really rubs me the wrong way. And all we're asking for is a little bit of honesty and realism. If you told us, listen, the Trump administration wants to balance the books, but Congress will not pass a balanced budget. They will refuse to pass it and the government will shut down. So we have to do this. It's not perfect, it's flawed, but it is what it is. I would have a lot more time for that and a lot more understanding of that. But I'm really just asking for a little bit of honesty here. And unfortunately, in politics in general, that's just really too much to ask. But what do you guys think? Do you support the big, beautiful bill? I still can't believe they literally named it that in the legislation. That's very funny to me, but whatever, I guess. Let me know in the comments and do hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Please do check out the merch, subscribe to the second channel, and send in voice notes. And with that, we'll talk again real soon.